In December 2021, a woman buying organic kale at a Portland farmer's market had no idea she was about to crack open an 18-year-old mystery. She posted a casual photo to Instagram. Fresh vegetables, rainy Saturday morning, the usual Portland aesthetic. But in the background, partially obscured by a vendor's tent, stood a young woman with distinctive features, dark eyes, a particular way of holding herself. Something familiar yet impossible. The photo went viral for reasons nobody expected. Facial recognition software flagged it. The match came back 94% certain. The woman in the background was Maya Rodriguez, missing since September 3, 2003, presumed dead for over a decade, but she was standing there, alive, buying tomatoes. What investigators discovered when they traced that photo would reveal one of the most disturbing cases of long-term captivity in Oregon history. Because Maya wasn't just alive. She'd been living less than 90 miles from her family's home for 18 years. And when police finally found her hidden in the wilderness of the Cascade Mountains, she didn't want to be rescued. Before we continue this shocking story, take a second to hit subscribe and like this video. Your support helps bring these forgotten stories to light, and the algorithm gods will make sure you don't miss any future uploads. The Maya Rodriguez case would span 18 years. Nearly 2 decades of searching, of false leads, of a family refusing to give up hope when everyone else had moved on. This wasn't just another missing person case. This was a daughter who vanished during a birthday celebration in one of America's safest cities. A young woman who simply stepped outside a restaurant and never came back. For 18 years, her face stared out from posters on telephone poles. From missing person databases, from the nightmares of everyone who loved her. The case would expose how easily someone can disappear even in the digital age. How psychological manipulation can be more powerful than any physical chains. How technology that tracks our every move can also be the tool that finally brings someone home. This is the story of Maya Rodriguez, of the family that never stopped searching, and of the 18 years that changed everything. When Maya first disappeared, the Hawthorne district community rallied together. Neighbors organized search parties. Local businesses printed thousands of flyers. The tight-knit Portland neighborhood that prided itself on looking out for each other mobilized like never before. But as months turned into years, cracks began to form. Some neighbors whispered that Maya had run away intentionally, that she'd wanted to escape something. Others insisted foul play, pointing fingers at everyone from her ex-boyfriend to random strangers. The Rodriguez family home became simultaneously a shrine and a target. People left flowers and candles. Others crossed the street to avoid eye contact, uncomfortable with grief that refused to fade. The case divided the community into those who kept searching and those who quietly gave up. Coffee shops that once displayed Maya's poster took them down after the first year. It's depressing for customers. One owner admitted years later that decision haunted him. Trust eroded in ways both obvious and subtle. Parents who once let their teenagers walk freely through Hawthorne's eclectic streets now drove them everywhere. The neighborhood's famous open, progressive atmosphere hardened into suspicion. Everyone became a potential suspect. Everyone carried the weight of unsolved tragedy. The scars of Maya's disappearance never fully healed. Even today, longtime residents can tell you exactly where they were when they heard she'd vanished. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. I'm always fascinated to see how far these stories travel and how they connect us across distances. Tonight, we're going to uncover the complete truth about what happened to Maya Rodriguez. You'll discover the exact circumstances of her disappearance on that September night in 2003. The massive investigation that followed and why it failed. The 18 years her family spent searching, the toll it took on every member. How a single Instagram photo cracked the case wide open in 2021. The disturbing reality of where Maya had been and what had been done to her mind. And the complex, bittersweet reunion that followed. This isn't a simple story of good versus evil. It's about the gray areas where psychological manipulation lives. About survival mechanisms our minds create when reality becomes unbearable. About a family's love that refused to accept the unacceptable. Prepare yourself. Because what happened to Maya Rodriguez and what she became during those 18 years will challenge everything you think you know about captivity and freedom. Tonight, we'll uncover the truth that hid in plain sight for nearly 2 decades. Portland, Oregon in 2003 was a city of approximately 550,000 people, known for its progressive politics, thriving art scene, and relentless rain. The Hawthorne district sat on the east side of the Willamette River, a neighborhood of vintage shops, independent bookstores, vegan restaurants, and the kind of eclectic character that defined Portland's identity. This wasn't the glossy, gentrified Portland of today. In 2003, Hawthorne still had rough edges, punk rock venues mixed with organic grocery co-ops. Artists could still afford rent. The streets filled with a mix of old hippies, young activists, struggling musicians, and working families who'd lived there for generations. The neighborhood prided itself on community values. People knew their neighbors. They looked out for each other. Weekly farmers' markets brought everyone together. Community gardens dotted empty lots. This was the kind of place where strangers struck up conversations at bus stops, where local coffee shops knew your order, where collective activism replaced individual isolation. The main commercial strip along Hawthorne Boulevard buzzed with foot traffic from morning until late night. Vintage clothing stores, record shops, Thai restaurants, dive bars that served craft beer before craft beer was mainstream. Street musicians played on corners. The 14 bus line connected the district to downtown, making it easy to get around without a car. But beneath Portland's progressive, safe reputation lurked the same dangers any city faces. The early 2000s brought rising drug problems, particularly methamphetamine. Homeless populations grew, property crime increased. And in the vast wilderness surrounding the city, the Cascade Mountains and dense forests offered endless places to hide. The Rodriguez family had lived in Hawthorne for 12 years before Maya disappeared. They'd moved from California seeking Portland's slower pace and better opportunities. They'd found a community. They'd built a life. They'd believed their daughter was safe in this neighborhood where everyone looked out for everyone. That belief would be shattered on a September night when the rain fell hard and their daughter walked out of a restaurant, never to return. Maya Rodriguez was 23 years old in September 2003. She stood 5'5", with thick black hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, dark brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her, and a quiet intensity that drew people in. She moved with natural grace, always seeming slightly more present than everyone else in the room. She had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the world, recalls Jessica Chen, who owned the Hawthorne coffee shop where Maya worked. Customers would come in just to talk to her. She remembered everyone's stories. Maya had moved to Portland with her family when she was 11, following her parents from San Jose. She'd fallen in love with the rain, the green, the way moss grew on everything. She'd graduated from Franklin High School in 1998, then enrolled at Portland State University to study environmental science. She was in her final year, only one semester away from graduation. Her studio apartment was small but reflected her personality, plants covering every surface, thrift store furniture she'd refinished herself, walls covered with photographs she'd taken of Portland's bridges and forests and rain-soaked streets. Friends described her as thoughtful, independent, sometimes too trusting. She believed in people's fundamental goodness, even when evidence suggested otherwise. She worked 20 hours a week at the Hawthorne Grind coffee shop to pay rent and tuition. The rest of her time she spent studying, hiking Forest Park's endless trails, volunteering at the community garden, and playing guitar at open mic nights. She wasn't famous or glamorous. She was simply Maya, the kind of person who made Portland feel like home. She dated occasionally but had no serious boyfriend. Her last relationship had ended 6 months earlier. An amicable split with a fellow student. She had close friends but treasured solitude equally. She was the type of young woman who could disappear into the woods for a weekend solo camping trip and return refreshed, at peace. Her parents worried about these solo trips. The wilderness could be dangerous, but Maya insisted she knew what she was doing. She'd taken wilderness survival courses. She carried emergency supplies. She always left detailed itineraries. She loved the Oregon wilderness with an intensity her parents never fully understood. "The forest is where I feel most myself," she told her mother just days before she disappeared. "Everything else is just noise." Those words would haunt her family for 18 years. September 3, 2003 began as an ordinary Wednesday in Portland. The temperature hovered around 68 degrees, typical for early September. Light rain fell intermittently, the kind of drizzle Portlanders don't even acknowledge as weather. Maya had morning classes at Portland State, environmental policy and advanced ecology. She attended both, took detailed notes, participated in discussions. Her professors remembered nothing unusual about her behavior that day. She seemed herself engaged, thoughtful, present. Around 2 p.m., she returned to her Hawthorne apartment. Her downstairs neighbor heard her moving around. Music playing softly, Annie Di Franco, her usual afternoon soundtrack. At 4:30 p.m., she left for her shift at the Hawthorne grind. She worked until 9 p.m., serving the dinner rush of students and artists and neighborhood regulars. Several co-workers later confirmed she seemed normal, maybe slightly distracted, but nothing alarming. She'd mentioned her birthday was coming up that weekend. She was turning 24. Friends were planning to take her out to celebrate. At 9:15 p.m., Maya clocked out. She changed out of her work shirt, grabbed her messenger bag, waved goodbye to Jessica. Security footage from the coffee shop shows her stepping onto rain-slicked Hawthorne Boulevard, pulling up her hood against the drizzle, checking her phone as she walked. At 9:47 p.m., Meyer arrived at Zephyr Bar and Grill on Southeast Morrison Street, about 8 blocks from her workplace. A group of 6 friends had gathered for an early birthday celebration. They ordered appetizers, craft beers, shared stories. Maya seemed happy, relaxed. Several friends took photos. She's smiling and everyone, her arm around friends, raising a glass. At 11:23 p.m., Maya stepped outside to take a phone call. Multiple witnesses confirmed this. The bar was loud, a band was playing, and she gestured to her phone. Mouthed, "I'll be right back," and walked toward the door. The phone records show a call from her mother, Carmen, lasted 4 minutes. Carmen later confirmed Maya sounded perfectly normal. They discussed plans for Sunday dinner. Maya promised to come by around 3 p.m. She said she loved her mother. She said she'd see her soon. At 11:27 p.m., security cameras from a neighboring business captured Maya standing on the sidewalk outside Zephyr. Phone to her ear. When the call ended, she stayed outside. She seemed to be waiting for something or someone. She checked her phone repeatedly. She paced slightly, the way people do when they're cold or impatient. At 11:34 p.m., a dark pickup truck pulled to the curb near where Maya was standing. The footage is grainy. This was 2003, before HD security cameras. The truck's license plate isn't visible. Maya appears to speak to whoever is in the truck. She doesn't seem frightened or threatened. After approximately 90 seconds of conversation, she walks around to the passenger side. She gets in. The truck drives away, heading east on Morrison Street. Maya Rodriguez was never seen again, not by her friends, not by her family, not by anyone who knew her name. When her friends realized 20 minutes later that she hadn't returned, they called her phone. Voicemail. They checked the bathrooms, walked around the block. Called again, nothing. At 12:15 a.m., they called her parents. By 12:45 a.m., they called the police. The Portland Police Bureau received the missing person report at 12:52 a.m. on September 4, 2003. Officer Jennifer Martinez responded, meeting Maya's frantic friends at Zephyr Bar and Grill. The initial classification was standard missing person protocol. An adult who'd been gone less than 2 hours. No signs of struggle. No immediate threat indicators. Officer Martinez took statements from all 6 friends, noting Maya's last known location and the mysterious truck. But something about the case immediately felt wrong to Martinez. Maya wasn't the type to leave without telling anyone. Her phone went straight to voicemail, either dead or turned off. Her friends were genuinely terrified, not just concerned, and that truck pickup on camera bothered Martinez deeply. By 2 a.m., Maya's parents, Carmen and Luis Rodriguez, arrived at the bar. The look on their faces would haunt Martinez for years, pure terror mixed with disbelief. This couldn't be happening, not to their daughter, not in safe, progressive Portland. Detective Sarah Chen was called in at 3:15 a.m., pulled from sleep by a supervisor who shared Martinez's instincts. Chen, 38 years old with 12 years in the Portland Police Bureau, had worked dozens of missing person cases. She knew the statistics. The first 24 hours were critical. Chen immediately requested security footage from every business within a 4-block radius. She interviewed Maya's friends individually, building a timeline. She contacted Maya's cell phone provider, requesting location data and call records. She dispatched officers to Maya's apartment to search for clues. By dawn, Chen had assembled a disturbing picture. Maya had no history of running away. No mental health crises, no drug problems, no debts or threatening ex-boyfriends. She'd been living a stable, quiet life. The only anomaly was that truck and Maya's decision to get inside it. The truck became the immediate focus. Detectives reviewed footage frame by frame. The make and model were difficult to determine, possibly a late 90s Chevrolet or GMC pickup, dark blue or black standard cab. No visible damage or distinctive features. No front license plate visible, and Oregon only required rear plates. The direction the truck headed east on Morrison was significant. That route led toward Interstate 84, which meant the driver could have gone anywhere. East into the Columbia River Gorge, south toward the Cascade Mountains, north into Washington State. The possibilities were endless. Chen organized an immediate search of the area surrounding Zephyr. Officers combed alleys, checked dumpsters, knocked on doors. They found nothing. No signs of struggle, no dropped belongings. Maya had simply gotten into that truck and vanished. By 10:00 a.m. on September 4th, less than 12 hours after Maya disappeared, the case was upgraded from standard missing person to suspicious disappearance. The next phase of investigation would require significantly more resources. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was notified on September 5, 2003, 36 hours after Maya's disappearance. While the case didn't immediately meet federal kidnapping criteria, there was no proof of abduction across state lines. The Portland field office assigned Special Agent Michael Torres to serve as liaison. Torres, 44 years old with 18 years in the FBI, brought resources Portland PD couldn't access. He had immediate entry to national databases, connections to field offices across the western United States, and authority to coordinate multi-state investigations if needed. The security footage concerned me immediately, Torres later testified. A young woman getting into an unknown vehicle and vanishing suggests either she knew the person or was deceived into thinking she did. Either way, this was predatory behavior. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was consulted to develop a preliminary profile. The perpetrator was likely male, between 30 and 50 years old, with local knowledge of Portland. He'd either been watching Maya specifically or had encountered her before and created a pretext for the meeting. The phone call from her mother might have been coincidental, or the perpetrator might have waited specifically for Maya to be alone outside. Federal resources expanded the investigation dramatically. The FBI's VI-CAP database was searched for similar disappearances in the Pacific Northwest. 3 other cases showed potential patterns: young women who disappeared after getting into vehicles with unknown drivers, but none had been solved. Torres arranged for FBI technical specialists to enhance the security footage. Using 2003 limited technology, they managed to improve image quality slightly, confirming the truck was indeed a Chevrolet Silverado, approximately 1995 to 1999 model year, dark blue. But the license plate remained unreadable and the driver's face was never visible. The FBI also brought media management expertise. Torres worked with Portland PD to coordinate press conferences, ensuring Maya's case received regional and national attention. By September 8th, Maya's face was on evening news broadcasts across the Pacific Northwest. The joint FBI Portland PD task force grew to 12 investigators dedicated full-time to the case. They interviewed hundreds of people, everyone who'd been at Zephyr that night, Maya's classmates and professors, her coffee shop customers, her neighbors. They subpoenaed phone records, credit card statements, email accounts. They tracked down and eliminated potential suspects. But despite all these resources, despite the urgency and expertise, they found nothing. Maya Rodriguez had disappeared as completely as if she'd never existed. The initial search for Maya Rodriguez mobilized hundreds of volunteers. The Hawthorne district community that had fractured over time initially came together with desperate unity. The first organized search began September 6, 2003, focusing on areas east of Morrison Street where the truck had been heading. Volunteers divided into teams, each assigned specific zones. They searched Forest Park's 5,200 acres of dense wilderness. They hiked trails along the Columbia River Gorge. They combed through industrial areas near the I-84 corridor. Carmen Rodriguez organized volunteer efforts from her living room, which became unofficial Command Central. Maps covered the walls, colored pins marking searched areas. Coffee stayed perpetually hot. Neighbors brought food. The house never emptied. By the second week, over 300 volunteers were searching daily. Portland's outdoor enthusiast community brought expertise, experienced hikers who knew hidden trails, climbers who could access difficult terrain, kayakers who searched riverbanks. The The scale was unprecedented for a missing person case, but the Cascade Mountains and surrounding wilderness encompass thousands of square miles. Dense forest where visibility extends only feet, ravines hundreds of feet deep, abandoned logging roads leading nowhere, rivers that could carry evidence for miles. The searchers faced impossible odds. 3 weeks in, the first body was found, a female approximate age match. The entire investigation halted as forensics worked. DNA testing took 4 agonizing days. It wasn't Maya, it was another young woman missing for 7 months. A different family's nightmare ended. Maya's family kept waiting. By October, organized searches scaled back. Most volunteers returned to normal lives. The Rodriguez family continued with a core group of about 30 dedicated searchers who refused to quit. Every Saturday and Sunday, they'd meet at dawn, pick a new area, and spend the day calling Maya's name into the wilderness. Luis Rodriguez took leave from his job as an electrician. He couldn't focus on wiring houses when his daughter was out there somewhere. He spent every daylight hour searching, often alone when others couldn't join. He developed expertise in wilderness tracking, studied maps obsessively, hiked hundreds of miles of trails. Carmen continued working. Someone needed to pay bills, but every free moment went to organizing search efforts, printing flyers, updating social media, relatively new in 2003, coordinating with media. She became the face of Maya's case, the mother who refused to give up. By December 2003, when Oregon winter made many areas impassable, the active search essentially ended. Volunteers promised to resume in spring, but everyone understood the unspoken reality. With each passing month, chances of finding Maya alive approached zero. The forest had swallowed her whole. Detective Sarah Chen approached Maya's case with methodical precision. While search teams combed the wilderness, Chen focused on building a comprehensive picture of Maya's life, looking for any detail that might explain her disappearance. Chen started with Maya's apartment. Every item was photographed, cataloged, analyzed. The apartment told a story of a young woman building a life. Plants thriving on every surface suggested someone who intended to return. Rent paid through September suggested no plans to leave. School books with highlighted passages suggested a student focused on finishing her degree. But certain items were missing. Maya's hiking backpack wasn't in the apartment. Her camping gear, tent, sleeping bag, portable stove, also gone. Initially, this seemed like evidence she'd planned a trip, but friends insisted Maya never went camping without telling someone. She always left detailed itineraries, always checked in. The missing gear became more puzzle than solution. Chen interviewed Maya's professors at Portland State. Dr. Robert Finch, who taught her environmental policy course, remembered Maya as exceptional. She had this deep connection to wilderness, he recalled. She wrote papers about preservation that showed real passion. She once told me humans were the invasive species and nature was trying to correct that. That philosophy intrigued Chen. Maya believed strongly in minimal human impact on nature. She'd talked about living off-grid someday. She'd expressed frustration with modern society's disconnect from the natural world. Could she have voluntarily disappeared to live in the wilderness? But friends rejected this theory. Maya was philosophical, sure, said her best friend Rachel Kim, but she wouldn't hurt us like that. She'd never make her parents suffer. She was weeks from graduating, for God's sake. She wouldn't throw that away. Chen dug into Maya's phone records. The calls in the weeks before her disappearance were routine friends, family, work. But buried in the data, Chen found something interesting. 3 calls from a prepaid cell phone that couldn't be traced. Each call lasted less than 90 seconds. Maya had answered all 3. When Chen contacted Maya's phone carrier for more details, she discovered these calls had come from cell towers in rural areas east of Portland. Mount Hood area, the Columbia Gorge, areas with sparse population and vast wilderness. Chen attempted to trace the prepaid phone's purchase. Dead end. Bought with cash at a convenience store, no security footage available, clerk couldn't remember the buyer. Standard practice for people who didn't want to be tracked. The investigation expanded to look at anyone in Maya's orbit who owned a dark blue Chevrolet Silverado. DMV records showed 847 registered vehicles matching that description in the Portland metro area. Each owner had to be interviewed, their alibi for September 3rd verified. One name caught Chen's attention, Thomas Webb, age 45, who lived in Sandy, Oregon, a small town 27 miles east of Portland, gateway to Mount Hood. Webb owned a 1997 dark blue Silverado. He worked as a wilderness survival instructor, teaching classes through Portland Community College's continuing education program. Chen and Torres drove to Sandy on September 19th to interview Webb. He lived in a modest house backed up against national forest land. The Silverado was parked in the driveway. Webb answered the door calmly, invited them inside, seemed cooperative. Webb explained he'd been teaching a weekend survival course on September 1 to 3, camping with students in the Mount Hood National Forest. He provided a roster of 12 students who could verify his whereabouts. He allowed detectives to search his property and vehicle without a warrant. They found nothing suspicious. Webb's alibi checked out. Every student confirmed he'd been with the group for the entire weekend, including September 3rd when Maya disappeared. Chen crossed him off the suspect list. It was a mistake that would cost 18 years. What time is it where you're watching? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how these stories reach people at different moments of their day. The investigation into Maya Rodriguez's disappearance faced obstacles that seem almost quaint from today's perspective, but in 2003 they were insurmountable walls. Cell phone tracking existed, but nothing like today's precision GPS. Tower triangulation could place a phone within a several-mile radius at best. Maya's phone had pinged off a tower near Gresham, east of Portland. Around 11:45 p.m. the night she disappeared, then went dark completely. Whether the battery died or the phone was destroyed, investigators never knew. Security camera footage was grainy, low resolution, often recorded over within days. The enhanced FBI footage of the truck was the best technology could provide in 2003. No way to read the license plate. No way to identify the driver. No facial recognition software existed yet. DNA databases were limited. Cody's existed but contained far fewer profiles than today. If the perpetrator had no prior felony convictions, his DNA wouldn't be in any system, and without a crime scene, there was no DNA evidence to compare anyway. Social media was barely beginning. MySpace launched in 2003 but wasn't yet widespread. Facebook didn't exist. Instagram wouldn't appear for another 7 years. The digital footprint that makes it nearly impossible to disappear today simply didn't exist. People could still vanish completely. Detective Chen's investigation was limited to traditional methods: interviews, phone records, credit card statements, paper trails. Maya used cash for most purchases. She didn't have credit cards beyond a single Visa with a $500 limit, used only for emergencies. Her bank account showed normal activity until September 3rd, then nothing. No withdrawals, no deposits, frozen in time. Financial forensics revealed Maya had $1,847 in savings, not enough to start a new life somewhere. Her student loan debt totaled $23,000. Her car, a 1995 Honda Accord, was found parked legally near her apartment, undisturbed. If she'd run away voluntarily, she'd done so without money, without a vehicle, without any of the resources needed to build a new identity. The FBI brought resources, but even federal capabilities had limits. Without evidence of interstate flight, without proof of kidnapping, without a body or a crime scene, the investigation could only go so far. Maya's case was heartbreaking and mysterious, but it wasn't unique. Hundreds of young adults disappeared every year in similar circumstances. By November 2003, the active investigation began winding down. Chen and Torres kept the case open, kept following leads, but daily resources were reallocated. Other cases demanded attention. Other families needed help. The machine of justice ground forward, leaving the Rodriguez family behind. The limitations weren't about lack of effort. Everyone involved cared deeply. But 2003 technology and databases simply couldn't solve certain types of cases. Maya had disappeared into a blind spot that law enforcement couldn't illuminate. In the first 6 months of investigation, Detective Chen interviewed 47 people categorized as persons of interest. Each interview followed the same pattern: establish timeline, verify alibi, assess behavior, clear or escalate. The first serious suspect was Derek Winters, Maya's ex-boyfriend. They dated for 8 months before breaking up in March 2003, 6 months before her disappearance. Friends described the relationship as intense but not abusive. The breakup had been mutual, or so everyone believed. Chen interviewed Winters on September 7th. He worked as a bike messenger in downtown Portland, lived in a studio apartment in the Pearl District. His alibi for September 3rd seemed solid. He'd been working until 8 p.m., then met friends at a bar in Northwest Portland until after midnight. 5 friends confirmed his presence, but Winters acted strangely during the interview. Nervous, evasive, couldn't maintain eye contact. When Chen asked about his relationship with Maya, he became defensive. "We were fine," he insisted. "The breakup was mutual. I wished her well." Phone records told a different story. Winters had called Maya 16 times in the 2 weeks before her disappearance. She'd answered only twice, both calls lasting under a minute. The pattern suggested someone who couldn't let go, someone possibly obsessive. Chen brought Winters in for a polygraph on September 12th. The results were inconclusive. He showed deception on some questions, but not others. His alibi held up under deeper scrutiny. But something about him bothered Chen. She kept him on the active suspect list. The second person of interest was Jason Kowalski, a regular customer at the Hawthorne grind. Multiple co-workers mentioned that Jason came in almost daily, always during Maya's shifts, always sat at the counter watching her work. He'd ask her about her life, her studies, her plans. Maya had mentioned to friends she found his attention uncomfortable but harmless. Kowalski, 38 years old, worked in IT for a downtown law firm. He lived alone in a Hawthorne apartment 3 blocks from the coffee shop. When Chen interviewed him on September 10th, his apartment was filled with computers, gaming equipment, and photography gear. Kowalski admitted he'd had a crush on Maya. "She was beautiful and kind," he said. "I know she wasn't interested. I never pushed it. I just liked being around her." His alibi for September 3rd was weak. He claimed he'd been home alone, working on personal programming projects. No witnesses, no digital trail that could verify his location. His truck was a white Ford, not a dark blue Chevrolet, but Chen noted he could have borrowed or rented a vehicle. A search of Kowalski's apartment with his permission revealed dozens of photographs he'd taken around Hawthorne, including several where Meyer appeared in the background. Street photography, he called it. Chen called it surveillance. Kowalski agreed to a polygraph. He passed on questions about Maya's disappearance but showed deception when asked if he'd ever followed her. Chen kept him under observation for months, but nothing connected him directly to September 3rd. The third suspect emerged from an unexpected direction. Dr. Marcus Chen, no relation to Detective Chen, was a professor of environmental studies at Portland State. Maya had taken 2 of his courses and had developed what several classmates described as an intense mentorship relationship with him. Dr. Chen, 52 years old, was married with 2 teenage children. He had an impeccable reputation. But 2 students came forward anonymously claiming Dr. Chen had made inappropriate advances toward female students in the past. Nothing was ever officially reported or investigated. When Detective Chen interviewed him on September 15th, Dr. Chen seemed genuinely devastated by Maya's disappearance. "She was one of my most promising students," he said. "Her passion for environmental preservation was extraordinary. I saw a future leader in her." His alibi was problematic. September 3rd was a Wednesday. He taught afternoon classes but claimed he went home directly afterward, arriving around 7 p.m. His wife confirmed he'd been home, but Chen noted the couple seemed rehearsed in their responses. Dr. Chen drove a silver Honda Civic, not a truck, but he also had access to university vehicles, including trucks used for field research. Records showed a university truck had been checked out September 1 to 4, ostensibly for a research trip. Dr. Chen claimed he'd been in eastern Oregon collecting soil samples. He had receipts from gas stations supporting this claim, but the timeline was loose enough to allow for a detour to Portland. Chen investigated thoroughly but couldn't break his alibi. His wife stood by the timeline. Gas station receipts, while not definitive, supported his story. Without physical evidence or witnesses placing him in Portland on September 3rd, Chen couldn't justify an arrest. She never fully cleared him from the suspect list. The fourth person of interest was someone Chen almost missed: Thomas Webb, the wilderness survival instructor. Even though his alibi for September 3rd had checked out, something nagged at Chen about the interview. She reviewed her notes from the Sandy visit. Webb had been too calm, too cooperative. Most innocent people showed some nervousness when police appeared. Webb had shown nothing. He'd allowed the search with practiced ease, as if he'd been expecting it. Chen dug deeper into Webb's background. He'd moved to Oregon in 1995 from Colorado. Before that, Nevada. Before that, California. He moved frequently, always to rural areas near wilderness. He had no criminal record, no arrests, not even traffic tickets. His history was almost suspiciously clean. His work history showed a pattern: wilderness guide, survival instructor, outdoor education. He'd worked for various community colleges and outdoor organizations, but never stayed anywhere longer than 3 years. Why the constant movement? Chen interviewed people who'd taken web survival courses. All described him as knowledgeable, professional, intense. "He's the real deal," one student said. "He doesn't just teach survival skills, he teaches a whole philosophy about living with nature instead of against it." That philosophy sounded familiar. Chen reviewed her notes from interviews with Maya's friends and professors. Maya had expressed nearly identical views about humanity's relationship with wilderness. Chen wanted to re-interview Webb, but Torres cautioned her. "His alibi is solid," Torres reminded her. 12 witnesses place him in Mount Hood when Maya disappeared. "We can't harass a citizen without probable cause." Chen reluctantly agreed. She moved Webb to the inactive suspect list, though she never completely forgot about him. Years later, that instinct would prove tragically correct. The investigation into Maya Rodriguez's disappearance generated thousands of leads. Most went nowhere. Each dead end felt like a small death, hope raised then crushed. A woman called from Eugene claiming she'd seen Maya working at a bookstore. Detective Chen drove the 2 hours south, showed Maya's photo to the employee in question. Different person. The caller had simply wanted to help, convinced she'd recognized the face from news coverage. A hiker found a woman's backpack in Forest Park containing a PSU student ID. The ID photo looked similar to Maya. Chen's heart raced as she examined it. Wrong name, wrong person. The backpack's owner was eventually located, alive and confused about why police wanted to talk to her. A psychic contacted the family claiming she'd had visions of Maya near water. Trapped in darkness. Carmen, desperate for anything, paid the woman $500 for a detailed reading. The psychic described a location that matched dozens of places in Oregon. Search teams investigated the most promising spots, found nothing. The psychic kept the money. In January 2004, a body was found in the Columbia River. Female, approximate age match, in the water for several months. The family endured 3 days of hell waiting for DNA results. Not Maya. Another woman, another family's tragedy. The Rodriguez family felt guilty for their relief. A clerk at a Mount Hood gas station called in March 2004, certain she'd seen Maya. She was with an older man buying supplies. She looked thin and scared. Chen drove up immediately with Maya's photo. The clerk studied it carefully, then admitted uncertainty. "Maybe it wasn't her, I don't know. I wanted it to be her so you could find her." False sightings poured in from across the country. Maya spotted in Seattle, in Los Angeles, in Phoenix, in Denver. Each required follow-up, resources, verification. Each turned out to be a different young woman with dark hair, or wishful thinking, or intentional cruelty from people who enjoyed causing pain. One of the cruelest dead ends came in August 2004, nearly a year after Maya's disappearance. Someone sent an anonymous letter to Carmen Rodriguez claiming they knew where Maya was buried. The letter included specific details: a logging road off Highway 26, mile marker 47, 200 yards into the woods on the north side. Search teams mobilized immediately. They brought cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, forensic specialists. They searched for 3 days. They found old beer cans, illegal dumping, the remains of campfires. No body. No evidence, no Maya. The letter writer was never identified. Whether it was a sick joke or genuine but mistaken belief, it inflicted fresh trauma on a family barely holding together. Detective Chen followed every lead with the same thoroughness, knowing most would fail but unable to ignore any possibility. The pressure was crushing. She dreamed about Maya. She saw her face in crowds. She started smoking again after years of being quit. The hardest part wasn't the lack of evidence, Chen later reflected. It was watching hope die over and over. Every lead that failed felt like losing Maya again, and her family experienced that loss every single time. By mid-2005, the flood of leads had slowed to a trickle. The case was going cold. Chen had followed every possible thread, interviewed everyone remotely connected to Maya, searched thousands of acres of wilderness. She had nothing. No body. No evidence. No answers. Just a dark blue Chevrolet truck driving east into the night, carrying Maya Rodriguez into oblivion. Luis Rodriguez stopped sleeping in 2003. Not immediately, but gradually, as weeks turned into months and the reality sank in that his daughter might never come home. At first, he slept only a few hours, waking repeatedly from nightmares where Maya called for help and he couldn't find her. By 2004, he averaged 2 or 3 hours a night lying awake staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in his mind. By 2005, he'd given up pretending to sleep at all. Instead, he walked. Every night around 2 o'clock a.m., Lewis left the house and walked through Hawthorne, past the grind where Maya had worked, past Zephyr where she'd last been seen, past her apartment building which had long since been rented to someone else. He walked for hours, as if movement could somehow undo the past, as if he might turn a corner and find her standing there. Lewis had been an electrician for 23 years, skilled work that required precision and focus. After Maya disappeared, his hands shook. He couldn't concentrate on wiring diagrams. He made mistakes that could have been dangerous. By Christmas 2003, he'd taken leave from his job. By March 2004, he'd lost that job entirely. He didn't care about work. Work meant nothing. His daughter was missing. He spent his days organizing search parties that grew smaller each month as volunteers returned to their lives. He printed flyers using money the family didn't have. He drove to every small town within 100 miles, posting Maya's photo in gas stations and grocery stores and post offices. He learned to use computers for the first time, creating a website dedicated to Maya's case. He taught himself HTML, spending hours at the library's public computers because they couldn't afford internet at home. The website was crude but functional. Maya's photo, details of her disappearance, a phone number for tips. The physical changes were dramatic. Lewis had always been stocky, strong from years of physical work. By 2005, he'd lost 40 pounds. His thick black hair went gray within a year. Friends who hadn't seen him for months sometimes didn't recognize him. He started drinking. Not constantly, not enough to be visibly drunk, but enough to dull the edge of panic that lived in his chest. A few beers every night, then a few more. By 2006, Carmen found empty bottles hidden in the garage, evidence of drinking Lewis didn't want her to see. The worst moments came on ordinary days when life tried to continue normally. Someone would laugh at a joke and Lewis would feel rage at their ability to find anything funny. The sun would shine and he'd resent its brightness. How dare the world be beautiful when Maya was gone? He stopped going to family gatherings, stopped calling friends, stopped participating in anything that wasn't directly related to finding Maya. His entire existence narrowed to a single purpose. Everything else was just noise. Carmen tried to reach him. "You're still here." And she'd say gently, "I need you to be present." But Lewis couldn't be present. Being present meant accepting a reality where Maya was gone. He refused to accept that reality. The relationship with Carmen strained nearly to breaking. They grieved differently. Carmen cried. Lewis couldn't cry. Carmen talked about her feelings. Lewis had no words. Carmen found solace in the support group. Lewis found the meetings unbearable. Sitting with other families whose loved ones were also missing felt like giving up, like admitting Maya was one of them. By 2007, 4 years after Maya's disappearance, Lewis had developed a ritual. Every Sunday he drove to the spot on Morrison Street where the security camera had captured Maya getting into that truck. He'd stand there for an hour, sometimes longer, trying to understand. What had she been thinking? Had she known the person driving? Had she sensed danger? He tortured himself with guilt. If he'd called her that night, maybe she wouldn't have been standing outside alone. If he'd taught her to be more suspicious of people. If he'd insisted she carry pepper spray. If, the word if became his constant companion, the syllable that defined his existence. Friends stopped calling because Lewis never answered. Neighbors stopped visiting because he couldn't maintain small talk. His world shrank to Carmen, the search. The waiting, everything else fell away. "I'm not living," he told Carmen one night after she found him in Maya's old room going through her childhood things. "I'm just not dying, there's a difference." Carmen held him then, and for the first time since Maya disappeared, Lewis broke down completely. He sobbed like a child, 18 years of held-back tears finally released. He cried for hours for his missing daughter, for his ruined life, for the man he used to be before September 3, 2003. The crying didn't fix anything. But it was the first step toward accepting that he might have to learn to live in a world where Maya was missing. He never succeeded at that, not really. For 18 years, Luis Rodriguez existed in limbo, waiting for an answer that refused to come. If you're finding this story as heartbreaking as I did while researching it, take a moment to leave a like. It helps more people discover these important stories. Carmen Rodriguez dealt with losing Maya by refusing to lose anything else. In the days after Maya disappeared, Carmen's instinct was to preserve everything exactly as it had been. Maya's apartment was cleaned out by the landlord after 2 months of unpaid rent, but Carmen rescued every item. She brought it all home. The plants, the thrift store furniture, the photographs, the books. She recreated Maya's space in what had been their guest room. For years, that room remained a shrine. Carmen watered the plants weekly even as they slowly died despite her care. She made the bed with fresh sheets every Sunday. She dusted the books, carefully replacing them in the same order. The room became frozen time, September 3, 2003, preserved forever. Unlike Lewis, Carmen kept working. They needed money. Bills didn't stop because your daughter disappeared. She continued her job as an administrative assistant at a downtown law firm, somehow finding the strength to show up every day to file papers and answer phones and act normal. But she wasn't normal. Coworkers noticed she'd lost weight, that her clothes hung loose. They saw her crying quietly in bathroom stalls. They heard her take calls from Detective Chen, stepping outside to speak privately, returning with red eyes. Her boss, Margaret Sullivan, called Carmen into her office in November 2003. "Take all the time you need," Margaret said. "Your job will be here. Take a leave of absence." Carmen refused. "If I stop working, I'll fall apart. Work is the only thing keeping me together." It was true. 8 hours a day, she could focus on tasks. She could pretend life was normal. She could exist in a world where her daughter hadn't vanished. The moment she got home, reality crashed back. But those 8 hours were survival. Carmen joined the Missing Persons Support Group of Portland in January 2004. She met other mothers who understood the unique torture of not knowing. She met Rebecca Torres, whose son had disappeared in 2001. She met Linda Patterson, whose daughter had vanished in 1999. These women became Carmen's lifeline. They met every Tuesday evening at a community center, sitting in a circle, sharing their stories. Some cried, some raged, some sat in silence, all understood. Through the group, Carmen found purpose. She learned to navigate the bureaucracy of missing persons cases. She learned which journalists to trust, which would sensationalize. She learned how to pressure police departments to keep cases active, how to organize vigils and press conferences, how to keep her daughter's name in public consciousness. By 2006, Carmen had become a leader in the organization. She mentored newly devastated parents, guiding them through the impossible early days. She organized monthly demonstrations outside the Portland Police Bureau, families holding photos of their missing loved ones, demanding answers and resources. She became expert at public speaking, her voice steady even when her heart was breaking. She testified before the Oregon State Legislature about the need for better missing persons protocols. She met with congresspeople about federal funding. She appeared on local news programs, always wearing Maya's favorite color, deep forest green, always keeping her daughter's face in front of cameras. The activism gave structure to Carmen's grief. She channeled unbearable pain into productive action. She couldn't find Maya, but she could help other families. She couldn't change the past, but she could fight to change how missing persons cases were handled. Her relationship with Lewis deteriorated. They grieved in opposite directions, Lewis withdrawing into silence, Carmen throwing herself into public action. They shared the same house, the same loss, but couldn't reach each other across the chasm that grief had opened between them. Some nights, Carmen would find Lewis sitting in Maya's shrine room in darkness. She'd stand in the doorway, wanting to go to him, but the distance felt too great. They were drowning separately, unable to save each other. Carmen had her own rituals. Every morning before work, she sat at the kitchen table with coffee and Maya's childhood photo album. She looked through pictures methodically, Maya as a baby, as a toddler, as a child, as a teenager. She'd touch each photo as if contact could somehow reach across the years. She kept Maya's cell phone number active, paying the monthly bill even though the phone itself had never been recovered. The voicemail greeting was still Maya's voice. "Hey, it's Maya, leave a message." Carmen called it sometimes just to hear her daughter's voice. She never left messages. What would she say? Anniversaries were brutal. Maya's birthday, September 22nd. Carmen baked Maya's favorite cake, chocolate with raspberry filling, and lit candles. She sang happy birthday to an empty room. The cake would sit on the counter for days until Carmen finally threw it away. The anniversary of the disappearance, September 3rd, was even worse. Carmen organized a vigil every year at the spot on Morrison Street where Maya had last been seen. The attendance dwindled over time, hundreds the first year, dozens by year 5, sometimes only the core support group members by year 10. But Carmen never missed it. She stood there with a candle and Maya's photo, bearing witness to her daughter's absence, refusing to let the world forget. Carmen aged decades in those years. Photos from 2003 showed a woman in her late 40s with dark hair and a quick smile. Photos from 2010 showed someone nearly unrecognizable, gray hair, deep lines around her eyes, a face that had forgotten how to smile naturally. But she survived. That was Carmen's gift and curse. She survived every impossible day. She got up every morning and kept living, kept fighting, kept hoping. Hope is a strange thing. She once told the support group, "It keeps you alive, but it also keeps you trapped. I can't move forward because maybe tomorrow will be the day we find her. So I exist in this permanent present, always waiting, never arriving." For 18 years, Carmen Rodriguez waited, and somehow, impossibly, she'd been right to wait. Maya Rodriguez was an only child. The grief Luis and Carmen experienced was singular, focused, undiluted by the needs of other children. This fact shaped their mourning in profound ways. There were no other children to care for, to maintain normalcy for, to provide reason to keep routines. The house that had once held 3 people held 2, and the absence of the third person filled every room like a presence. Friends with multiple children sometimes told Carmen they couldn't imagine losing an only child. "At least if something happened to one of mine, I'd still have the others," they'd say, thoughtlessly cruel in their attempt at comfort. Carmen would smile tightly and change the subject, but she thought about it. If they'd had other children, would the loss be different, divided, easier? She didn't think so. Loss wasn't mathematics. You couldn't subtract one child and still have a sum that equaled a family. Maya's extended family, Luis's 2 brothers, Carmen's sister, tried to help in the early months. They brought food, sat with Carmen and Luis, helped with search efforts. But as time passed, their presence became uncomfortable. They had their own lives, their own children. They couldn't remain in perpetual mourning. By 2005, family visits had become strained, obligatory. Christmas dinners where no one knew what to say. Birthday celebrations for nieces and nephews where everyone avoided mentioning that Maya would have been 26, 27, 28. The family slowly learned to function around the missing piece. But that piece's absence never stopped being noticed. Luis's brother David once tried to suggest they consider having another child. Luis was 52 in 2005, Carmen was 49. It was biologically possible. "Maybe a baby would help you heal," David offered. Luis didn't speak to his brother for 2 years after that suggestion. The house itself became a shrine to the family they'd been. Photos of Maya covered every wall, her artwork from childhood, her high school diploma, her acceptance letter to Portland State, all framed and displayed. It was simultaneously a celebration and a memorial, honoring someone who wasn't dead but also wasn't present. Friends stopped visiting because the house was too heavy with grief. The carefully preserved shrine room, the photos everywhere. Luis and Carmen living among memories, unable to move forward, unable to let go. By 2010, 7 years after Maya's disappearance, Luis and Carmen had essentially become isolated. The missing persons support group was Carmen's only social outlet. Luis had withdrawn completely. They existed together in their grief, parallel lines that never quite met. The absence of other children meant they had nothing to distract them from missing Maya. No school plays to attend, no sports games to watch, no graduations to celebrate. Every milestone that should have been Maya's passed in devastating silence. The Hawthorne district that existed before September 3, 2003 never fully returned. The neighborhood had prided itself on openness, on the kind of casual trust that lets children play unsupervised and strangers strike up conversations. Maya's disappearance shattered that trust like a window, leaving sharp edges everywhere. Parents who'd let their teenagers walk freely through Hawthorne streets started driving them places. The number of young people at nighttime coffee shops and late-night restaurants dropped dramatically. Businesses that relied on that demographic struggled. The Hawthorne grind, where Maya had worked, became a pilgrimage site of sorts. People would come in, order coffee, sit where she'd served customers, trying to understand what had happened. Jessica Chen, the owner, found it unbearable. She closed the shop in 2005, selling the space to a vintage clothing store. She couldn't exist anymore in a space so haunted. Zephyr Bar and Grill, where Maya had last been seen, also suffered. People avoided it as if the location itself was cursed. Business dropped by 40% in the first year. The owners tried rebranding, renovation, menu changes. Nothing worked. The building was eventually sold and converted to a vegan restaurant, an attempt to erase the history embedded in the walls. Community events changed. The annual Hawthorne Street Fair continued, but with heightened security. The casual, anarchic spirit was replaced by careful planning and visible police presence. The neighborhood's character shifted from open and welcoming to cautious and protective. Some neighbors moved away entirely. I couldn't shake the feeling that something evil had touched our neighborhood, one former resident explained. Every time I walked past that spot on Morrison, I felt sick. I had to leave. Others dug in deeper, determined not to let fear win. They organized neighborhood watch programs. They installed security cameras. They created phone trees for checking on each other. The community became more connected in some ways, bound by shared trauma and determination to prevent another disappearance. The case also exposed class divisions that had existed beneath Hawthorne's progressive surface. Maya had been a working-class kid, daughter of an electrician and a secretary. Some wealthier residents quietly blamed Carmen and Louis for not protecting their daughter better, for letting her work at a coffee shop, for allowing her to take the bus instead of driving her places. These whispers were never said directly but floated through the community like poison. Carmen heard them secondhand, adding another layer of pain to an already unbearable situation. By 2010, Hawthorne was gentrifying rapidly. The artists and working families who defined the neighborhood were being priced out by tech workers and professionals. The new residents didn't know Maya's story. To them, Hawthorne was just a trendy place to live, not a community still mourning. Old-timers resented the newcomers' ignorance. They walk past that spot on Morrison every day and have no idea, one longtime resident said bitterly. They think this is just a fun neighborhood with good restaurants. They don't know it's built on grief. The missing persons support group became the keeper of Maya's memory. Every September 3rd, they held a vigil. Every year, fewer people attended. The community was forgetting, moving on, healing in ways the Rodriguez family couldn't. The first year after Maya's disappearance moved like frozen honey. Every day lasted forever. Every hour was weighted with desperate hope that this would be the day, the moment, the breakthrough. The second year moved differently. Faster in some ways, each month sliding into the next, marked only by failed leads and growing desperation. The third anniversary came with crushing suddenness. How had 3 years passed? By the fifth year in 2008, time had become strange. In some ways, it felt like Maya had disappeared yesterday. In other ways, it felt like a lifetime ago. Carmen could barely remember the person she'd been before. The woman who worried about normal things like whether dinner would burn or if it would rain. Detective Chen officially retired in 2009, 6 years after taking Maya's case. She'd never solved it. At her retirement party, she pulled Carmen aside. "I'm sorry," she said, tears in her eyes. "I tried everything, I just couldn't find her." Carmen hugged the detective who'd become almost like family. "I know you tried, thank you for never giving up." But Chen's retirement meant Maya's case was transferred to a new detective with dozens of other cold cases demanding attention. The transition felt like another small death, another step toward being forgotten. The 10th anniversary in 2013 was planned as a major media push. Carmen organized a press conference, invited every news outlet in Oregon, prepared a statement asking for renewed investigation. The media response was tepid. 10-year-old missing person cases weren't news anymore. A few local stations covered it, nothing national. Louis stood beside Carmen at that press conference, gaunt and gray, looking 20 years older than his age. He said nothing. His presence was his statement. "I am still here, I am still waiting, I will never stop waiting." Technology changed around them. Smartphones became ubiquitous. Social media exploded. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, platforms that could spread information globally in seconds. Carmen learned to use them all, creating pages dedicated to Maya, sharing her photo, keeping her story alive in digital space. The missing persons community had evolved too. Online groups connected families across the country. Carmen found herself corresponding with parents in Florida and Alaska and Maine, all searching for their children, all living in the same horrible limbo. Some cases got solved, bodies found, arrests made. Each resolution was bittersweet, another family's nightmare ending but never Carmen's. She celebrated with them and cried alone afterward. By 2015, 12 years gone, Carmen had settled into a rhythm of grief. She worked, she advocated, she existed. Hope had morphed into something else, not expectation exactly, but an inability to give up. She couldn't stop searching because stopping would mean accepting Maya was gone forever. Louis had deteriorated steadily. He barely left the house anymore except for his Sunday ritual at Morrison Street. He'd lost his license after a DUI in 2014. Carmen drove him where he needed to go, which was almost nowhere. He existed, breathing and eating and sleeping occasionally, but he wasn't living. Their marriage survived barely. They stayed together because separating would require energy neither had. They functioned as roommates who shared a tragedy, moving around each other in the house, occasionally touching but never truly connecting. The house itself showed the passage of time. Paint fading, repairs neglected. The shrine room's plants all dead now, dried husks Carmen couldn't bring herself to remove. Maya's photos were sun-faded in frames that needed dusting. Outside, Hawthorne had continued changing. The vintage shops were replaced by upscale boutiques. The dive bars by craft cocktail lounges. The neighborhood Carmen had loved was disappearing, just like her daughter had. By 2020, 17 years after Maya vanished, Carmen was 64 years old. She should have been thinking about retirement, about grandchildren, about the future. Instead, she remained frozen in 2003, waiting for news that never came. Until December 2021, when a woman posted a photo to Instagram and everything changed. Every September 3rd for 18 years, Carmen Rodriguez performed the same ritual. She woke at dawn, no matter what day of the week it fell on. She showered, dressed carefully in forest green, Maya's favorite color. She made coffee using Maya's favorite mug, the one with "Powered by Plants" printed on the side, a gift from Rachel Kim during their sophomore year. At 8 a.m., Carmen went to Maya's shrine room. She sat in the chair beside the bed and read aloud from Maya's journals. Maya had kept journals since middle school, filling notebooks with observations about nature, frustrations with society, dreams about the future. Carmen knew these entries by heart but read them anyway, hearing Maya's voice in the words. At 11 a.m., Louis joined her. This was the only day all year he willingly entered that room. Together, they looked through photo albums, remembering Maya at every age. Neither spoke much. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been said 1,000 times. At 2 p.m., they drove to Morrison Street. Over the years, the spot where Maya had gotten into that truck had changed. Different businesses occupied the building where Zephyr had been. The sidewalk had been repaved. But Carmen and Louis could still see exactly where she'd stood in that grainy security footage. They brought flowers, wildflowers, never roses. Maya had loved wildflowers, the chaotic beauty of them. They placed the flowers on the sidewalk, lit candles, and stood in silence for exactly 1 hour. In the early years, hundreds of people joined them, the community showing support, sharing grief. By 2010, attendance had dwindled to maybe 30 people. By 2015, it was down to 15. By 2020, only the core missing persons support group remained: Linda Patterson, Rebecca Torres, and a handful of others whose own tragedies kept them connected to Maya's story. At 4 p.m., Carmen gave a statement to whatever media had bothered to show up. Some years, multiple news crews attended. Other years, no one came. Carmen gave the statement anyway, speaking to empty air if necessary, because speaking kept Maya real. She always said the same thing. Maya Rodriguez disappeared 18 years ago today. She was 23 years old. She was studying environmental science at Portland State. She was loved. She is still loved. If anyone has any information about what happened to her, please contact Portland Police. Our family will never stop searching. At 6 p.m., they returned home. Carmen made Maya's favorite dinner, vegetarian enchiladas with black beans and roasted peppers. She set 3 places at the table, one for her, one for Louis, one for Maya's absence. They ate in silence, the empty chair screaming louder than any words. At 9 p.m., Carmen went to bed. She never slept on the anniversary, but she laid down anyway, following the ritual. Louis walked the neighborhood until dawn, as he did every night. But on the anniversary, his route always ended at Morrison Street, where he'd stand until light broke over the city. The ritual never varied, not once in 18 years. It was the only structure that made sense in a world that had lost all meaning. Some years were harder than others. The 5th anniversary, when hope had begun truly dying. The 10th, when media interest had evaporated. The 15th, when Carmen realized she'd spent more years searching for Maya than she'd spent raising her. The 18th anniversary, September 3, 2021, was perhaps the hardest. Carmen was 65 years old. Louis was 68. They were getting old. What would happen to Maya's case when they were gone? Who would remember her? Who would keep searching? That night, Carmen broke from the ritual for the first time. After Louis left for his walk, she went into Maya's room and screamed. Not crying, just screaming, raw, primal, the sound of 18 years of accumulated pain finally released. She screamed until her voice gave out, until her throat was raw, until she collapsed on Maya's bed sobbing. "Please," she whispered to the empty room. "Please let me know what happened. I just need to know. I can't keep waiting forever." 3 months later, a woman would post a photo to Instagram. Sometimes the universe listens. By 2021, the Hawthorne district bore almost no resemblance to the neighborhood where Maya Rodriguez had disappeared. The affordable apartments where Maya had lived were now luxury condos starting at $450,000. The coffee shops and dive bars had been replaced by upscale brunch spots and wine bars. The neighborhood's bohemian character had been buried under development and gentrification. New residents had no connection to Maya's story. They walked past the spot on Morrison Street, now home to an organic juice bar, without knowing what had happened there. The neighborhood's collective memory was fading as the people who'd lived through 2003 moved away or died, but some things remained. The missing persons support group still met at the same community center, though the building had been renovated with donor money Carmen had helped raise. The group had grown to over 40 families, each carrying their own unbearable loss. Carmen had become a fixture in Portland's advocacy community. She served on the board of the National Center for Missing Adults. She consulted with law enforcement on cold case protocols. She testified regularly before state and federal committees about missing persons resources. Her work had created real change. Oregon implemented new reporting requirements for missing adults. Funding increased for cold case investigations. DNA testing protocols improved. Carmen couldn't find Maya, but she'd helped find dozens of other missing people. The annual vigil on September 3rd had become institutionalized. It was no longer just about Maya, but about all missing persons. Families brought photos of their loved ones. Someone read names of every unsolved disappearance in Oregon. Candles were lit, prayers were spoken, tears were shed. The Portland Police Bureau had created a cold case unit in 2015, directly influenced by Carmen's advocacy. Detective Michael Harrison inherited Maya's case along with 47 others. He approached it with fresh eyes, using technology that hadn't existed in 2003. Harrison re-interviewed everyone from the original investigation still alive and willing to talk. He submitted old evidence for new DNA testing. He uploaded crime scene data to national databases. He was thorough, dedicated, genuinely cared, but he found nothing new. The trail was too cold, the evidence too sparse. Maya had vanished too completely. The neighborhood's transformation was complete by 2021. Even the street layout had changed: new bike lanes, wider sidewalks, different traffic patterns. You could walk through Hawthorne now and never know a young woman had disappeared there. Never sense the tragedy that had unfolded on these ordinary streets. Only the old-timers remembered. Only the families who'd lost someone to the void. They carried Hawthorne's true history in their bones, the story written beneath the surface, invisible to everyone else. Carmen sometimes walked through the neighborhood, barely recognizing it. She'd stand in front of the building that used to be the Hawthorne Grind, now a boutique selling $200 handbags, and try to remember what it had looked like when Maya worked there. The memories were fading, becoming fuzzy at the edges. That terrified her more than anything. What if she forgot Maya's face? What if the memories dissolved entirely? What if Maya became just another name in a database, a case number in a filing cabinet? She couldn't let that happen, so she kept telling Maya's story. She kept organizing vigils. She kept her daughter's name alive through sheer force of will. In December 2021, that determination would finally be rewarded. December 11th, 2021 started as an ordinary Saturday in Portland. Rain fell steadily as it had for weeks. The temperature hovered around 45 degrees. Winter in the Pacific Northwest, gray and wet and unremarkable. A woman named Jennifer Cole woke up around 8 a.m. in her southeast Portland apartment. She was 32, worked in marketing for a tech startup, spent her Saturdays the way many young Portlanders did: farmers markets, coffee shops, errands scattered across the city. Around 10 a.m., Jennifer arrived at the PSU Farmers Market in the South Park blocks downtown. The market was smaller in winter but still vibrant, vendors selling root vegetables, artisan bread, handmade soaps, local honey. Jennifer browsed the stalls, buying organic kale and heirloom potatoes. At 10:37 a.m., she took a photo. Just a casual Instagram shot. Her canvas shopping bag full of vegetables, rain-soaked streets in the background, the market buzzing with Saturday morning energy. She added a filter, wrote a caption: "Rainy market mornings are the best mornings, cloud leafy # Portland # farmers market # eat local." She posted it and thought nothing more about it. The photo went live to her 847 followers. Most scrolled past. A few liked it. 2 people commented about the weather. Standard social media interaction, forgettable and routine. But Instagram's facial recognition algorithm flagged something in the background. The software had been improving for years, trained on billions of images, capable of identifying faces in crowds in partial obscurity at angles human eyes might miss. The algorithm noticed a woman partially visible behind a vendor's tent in Jennifer's photo. Dark hair pulled back, distinctive facial structure, high cheekbones, deep-set eyes. The algorithm cross-referenced that face against databases, public photos, missing persons databases that tech companies had partnered with law enforcement to access. Millions of comparisons happening in milliseconds. The match came back 94.7% certain. The face belonged to Maya Rodriguez, missing since September 3, 2003. Case number 03 to 47,892, presumed dead or permanently missing. But there she was, alive, buying tomatoes at a Portland farmer's market. The automated alert went to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Adults at 11:02 a.m. A case manager named Patricia Thompson reviewed the flag. These alerts were common. The algorithm frequently produced false positives, people who looked similar, matches that didn't hold up under human review, but Patricia had been trained to check every alert thoroughly. She pulled up Maya Rodriguez's file. She studied the original missing person photos from 2003. She examined Jennifer Cole's Instagram post, zooming in on the background figure. The resemblance was striking. The facial structure matched. The woman appeared to be the right age, early 40s, which Maya would be now. The dark hair, though streaked with gray, was similar. The way she held herself, something ineffable about her presence. Patricia made the call at 11:47 a.m. She contacted Detective Michael Harrison at Portland Police Cold Case Unit. "I have a potential match on Maya Rodriguez," she said. "Facial recognition hit from a social media post this morning. I think you need to see this." Harrison pulled up the photo on his computer. His heart rate accelerated. He'd been working Maya's case for 6 years, had her file memorized. He knew her face from every angle, every age progression, every photograph the family had provided. The woman in that farmer's market photo could absolutely be Maya Rodriguez. Harrison immediately contacted his supervisor. Within an hour, a team was mobilized. They needed to verify this lead without causing a scene. If it was Maya, they needed to approach carefully. After 18 years of captivity, if that's what this was, she could be psychologically fragile, potentially dangerous to herself or others. They pulled Jennifer Cole's Instagram location data. The photo had been taken at PSU Farmers Market in downtown Portland, posted at 10:37 a.m. The market ran until 2:00 p.m. on Saturdays. It was now 12:45 p.m. If Maya was there, she might still be there. Detective Harrison and 3 plainclothes officers arrived at the farmers market at 1:15 p.m. They spread out, looking casual, scanning faces in the crowd. The market was moderately busy despite the rain, maybe 150 people browsing stalls, buying produce, drinking coffee. Harrison walked slowly through the market, his trained eye searching. So many faces, so many women with dark hair. Was she still here? Had she left? Was this whole thing a false alarm? At 1:33 p.m., Officer Rebecca Santos spotted her. A woman standing at a vegetable stand examining carrots. Dark hair pulled into a low ponytail, gray streaks visible. She wore a green raincoat, jeans, hiking boots. She looked to be in her early 40s. She was thin, too thin, with the kind of worn appearance that came from hard living. Santos casually moved closer, pretending to look at vegetables. The woman's profile became visible. Santos had studied Maya's photos during the briefing. The resemblance was undeniable, the bone structure, the distinctive nose, the way her eyebrows curved. Santos activated her radio. "I have visual confirmation, north end of market vegetable stand." Harrison approached from the opposite direction, moving slowly, non-threateningly. 2 other officers positioned themselves at exits just in case she ran. Harrison stopped a few feet away. His mouth was dry. After 6 years working this case, after studying every detail, after countless conversations with Carmen and Luis Rodriguez, he was potentially standing 5 feet from their missing daughter. "Excuse me," he said quietly, his voice carefully controlled. "I'm Detective Michael Harrison with Portland Police. I'd like to speak with you for a moment." The woman turned. Her eyes met his, dark brown, intelligent, wary. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, something shifted in her expression. Recognition, fear, resignation. "My name is Sarah," she said. Her voice was calm, measured. "Sarah Webb, I think you have me confused with someone else." Harrison's heart sank and soared simultaneously, the voice. He'd listened to recordings of Maya Rodriguez speaking, old voicemail messages the family had saved, a video from a college presentation. The voice matched. The cadence. The slight huskiness. "Ma'am, I'm not here to cause you any trouble," Harrison said gently, "but I believe you might be Maya Rodriguez. If you are, your family has been searching for you for 18 years. They love you. They've never stopped looking." The woman's face remained expressionless. "I'm Sarah Webb," she repeated. "I live in Sandy. I'm just here buying vegetables." Sandy, the word hit Harrison like electricity. Sandy, Oregon, 27 miles east of Portland. The same town where Thomas Webb had lived in 2003, the wilderness survival instructor who'd been questioned and cleared. "Sarah Webb," Harrison said carefully. "Are you related to Thomas Webb?" A flicker of something crossed her face. Fear, protectiveness. "He's my husband," she said. Harrison felt every piece click into place. Thomas Webb, the suspect he'd recently revisited while reviewing the case files. The man whose alibi had seemed solid but who'd always felt wrong somehow. The man who'd moved to Oregon in 1995 and taught wilderness survival. The man who'd been teaching a course when Maya disappeared, or had he? "Ma'am, I need you to come with us to the police station," Harrison said. "We need to verify your identity. If you're truly Sarah Webb, you'll be free to go. But if you're Maya Rodriguez, your family deserves to know you're alive." The woman stood completely still, rain falling around her, the farmer's market continuing its mundane Saturday rhythm. People browsed vegetables, unaware they were witnessing the resolution of an 18-year mystery. "I can't leave," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thomas is waiting for me at home. He'll worry." "We can contact your husband," Harrison said, "but you need to come with us now." For a moment, Harrison thought she might run, her body tensed. Her eyes darted toward the exits, but then something in her collapsed. Her shoulders sagged. 18 years of whatever she'd been holding together suddenly too heavy to carry. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Maya Rodriguez, though she still insisted her name was Sarah Webb, was transported to Portland Police Central Precinct at 2:15 p.m. on December 11, 2021. She was placed in an interview room, not under arrest but not free to leave either. A female officer, Detective Lisa Martinez, stayed with her. Maya sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. "Can I get you anything?" Martinez asked. "Water, coffee?" "Water would be nice," Maya said softly. "Thank you." Her politeness was eerie. After 18 years missing, after being identified at a farmer's market, she spoke with careful courtesy, as if this were a social visit and not a moment that would tear apart everything she'd built. While Maya waited, Detective Harrison mobilized every available resource. He needed definitive identification before contacting the Rodriguez family. He couldn't give them false hope. Not after 18 years. Fingerprints were the fastest method. Maya's prints from her driver's license application in 2001 were still on file. A technician took Maya's prints at 2:47 p.m. The comparison took 12 minutes. Perfect match. 10 points of identification. Conclusive. The woman calling herself Sarah Webb was definitively Maya Rodriguez. Harrison made the second call at 3:03 p.m. to Thomas Webb's residence in Sandy, Oregon. He needed to secure Webb before he could be warned, before he could run or destroy evidence. The phone rang 4 times. A male voice answered. "Hello, Mr. Thomas Webb?" Harrison asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Detective Michael Harrison with Portland Police. I need to speak with you about your wife." "Sarah?" There was a long pause. "Is she okay? Did something happen?" The concern in his voice sounded genuine. Harrison had heard enough liars to recognize authenticity. Webb truly cared about the woman he knew as Sarah. That made this more complicated, not less. "Your wife is fine, but we need you to come to Portland Police Central Precinct. Can you do that?" Another pause. "Why? What's going on?" "I can't discuss it over the phone, but I need you to come in immediately. If you don't, I'll have to send officers to bring you in." Harrison heard something in the background, a door closing, footsteps, what sounded like Webb moving to a different room. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Quieter, more controlled. "This is about Maya, isn't it?" Webb said. "You found her at the market." The admission hung in the air. Harrison's hand tightened on the phone. "Mr. Webb, I need you to come to the station now. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "I'll come," Webb said, "but you need to understand, I saved her. She wanted this. She chose this life." The line went dead. Harrison immediately dispatched officers to Webb's address with instructions to bring him in and secure the property. If Webb tried to run, they'd intercept. If he stayed, they'd bring him in peacefully. While that was in motion, Harrison turned his attention to the harder task, notifying Carmen and Luis Rodriguez. He'd spoken with Carmen dozens of times over the 6 years he'd worked the case. She called every few months for updates. She emailed newspaper articles about other solved cold cases, asking if similar techniques could apply to Maya's disappearance. She never gave up, never stopped hoping, even when hope seemed irrational. Harrison drove to the Rodriguez home in Hawthorne, arriving at 3:45 p.m. He brought Detective Martinez with him. Good news should never be delivered alone. You needed backup in case the shock caused medical issues or psychological crisis. Carmen answered the door. She was 65 now, gray-haired, her face lined with years of grief. When she saw Harrison on her porch, her hand went to her throat. "No," she whispered. "Please, not a body. Please don't tell me you found a body." "Mrs. Rodriguez," Harrison said gently, "we need to come inside. Is Louis home? He's resting upstairs. Please just tell me. I can't take any more waiting." Harrison took a breath. He'd rehearsed this moment in his mind 100 times during the drive over, but now that he was here, the words felt impossible. "We found Maya," he said. "She's alive." Carmen's knees buckled. Martinez caught her, helped her to the couch. Louis appeared at the top of the stairs, having heard the commotion. "What's happening?" he called down, his voice rough from sleep. "Louis," Carmen said, her voice breaking. They found her. They found Maya. She's alive." The sound Louis made was inhuman, a wail that came from somewhere deep and primal. He collapsed on the stairs, sobbing, 18 years of grief finally released. This breakthrough came after decades of silence. Hit the like button if you believe in the power of persistence and modern forensic science to bring justice. While the Rodriguez family processed the impossible news, the investigation into exactly what had happened to Maya over 18 years accelerated. Thomas Webb was brought to Portland Police Central Precinct at 4:32 p.m. He came willingly, didn't ask for a lawyer, seemed almost relieved the secret was finally out. He was a wiry man, 63 years old now, with weather-beaten skin and the intense gaze of someone who'd spent decades in wilderness. He wore the practical clothing of an outdoorsman, worn Carhartt jacket, hiking boots, thermal shirt. In the interview room, Webb was calm, almost serene. Detective Harrison and FBI Special Agent Karen Delgado, brought in because the case potentially involved interstate issues, sat across from him. "Mr. Webb," Harrison began, "you understand you're being questioned about the disappearance of Maya Rodriguez in September 2003. Her name is Sarah." Webb said quietly, "She chose that name, you should respect that." "Let's start at the beginning," Delgado said. "How did you meet Maya?" Webb leaned back, folding his arms. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he began to speak, his voice measured, as if he'd rehearsed this confession for years. "I first saw her in 2002, he said. "I was teaching a weekend wilderness survival course through Portland Community College. She attended one of my lectures about minimal-impact camping. She asked brilliant questions. She understood what I was teaching in a way most students never did, that humans are meant to live with nature, not against it." Harrison and Delgado exchanged glances. This was a confession delivered with unsettling calm. "After the lecture, we talked for over an hour," Webb continued. "She told me about her environmental science major, her frustration with modern society, her feeling that humans had lost something essential. She felt it too, the disconnect, the wrongness of how we live now." "So you started communicating with her," Harrison prompted. "I gave her my phone number. We talked maybe 3 or 4 times over the next year, just conversations about philosophy, about wilderness, about the ways society is destroying both the planet and the human soul." Those were the prepaid phone calls Chen had found in 2003. Harrison realized, the ones she couldn't trace. "On September 3, 2003, I called Maya," Webb said. "I told her I was in Portland, asked if she wanted to meet. She was celebrating her birthday with friends. She said yes." "Where did you pick her up?" Delgado asked. "Morrison Street, outside the restaurant where she'd been with friends. She got in my truck willingly. I didn't force her. I didn't threaten her. She wanted to talk." "Where did you go?" "I drove towards Sandy. We talked the whole way. I told her I was planning to live off-grid permanently, to reject modern society completely. I asked if she'd ever considered doing the same." Webb paused, seeming to remember that night. "She said she'd thought about it. She felt trapped by expectations, finish school, get a job, live in a city, consume resources, die without ever really living. She felt suffocated." "So you offered her an alternative," Harrison said, his tone neutral despite his internal disgust. "I offered her freedom," Webb corrected. "I told her she could come with me. We could build a life in wilderness, away from all the noise and pollution and artificial demands. I told her it would be hard but real." "And she agreed?" Delgado asked skeptically. "Not immediately. We talked for hours that night. I took her to my property in the mountains, showed her what I'd built, a cabin, gardens. A life that required nothing from the corrupt system. She was fascinated. But she didn't call her family, Harrison said, didn't tell anyone where she was. Webb's expression hardened. I told her that leaving required complete commitment. You can't be half in wilderness and half in civilization. She had to choose go back to her old life or start fresh. She chose fresh. Mr. Webb, Delgado said, her voice sharp. Maya Rodriguez was reported missing the next day. Her family searched for her for 18 years. Are you telling us she voluntarily cut off all contact? At first, I encouraged it, Webb admitted. I told her that contact would weaken her resolve, make her doubt, but after the first few months it was her choice. She didn't want to go back. Harrison pulled out a legal pad. Let's establish the timeline. Where did you keep Maya in 2003? She wasn't kept, Webb insisted. She lived with me. My property in the Mount Hood National Forest, a cabin I'd built on inherited land. Off-grid, solar panels for minimal electricity, well-watered gardens. We lived simply. For how long? Until 2007, then I bought property near the Columbia Gorge, more remote, better for sustainability. We moved there. And Maya agreed to all these moves. Sarah, Webb corrected. She took the name Sarah when we started our life together. It represented her rebirth. And yes, she agreed. She helped choose the properties. She designed the gardens. Delgado made notes. Mr. Webb, you understand that regardless of whether Maya went with you initially, keeping her isolated from her family for 18 years constitutes kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment. I never locked her in, Webb said. She could have left any time she didn't want to. Did she have access to communication, phone, internet? Webb hesitated. No. Communication technology was part of what we were rejecting. That was the point, to live outside the system entirely. So she had no way to contact her family even if she wanted to. She didn't want to, Webb repeated stubbornly. The interview continued for hours. Webb described their life in detail, the cabins, the gardens, the routines. He described teaching Maya. He kept calling her Sarah, advanced survival skills, wilderness first aid, foraging, hunting, building. He described their relationship, which had apparently evolved from mentor-student to romantic partners, though Maya had been 23 and he'd been 45 when he took her. Webb provided addresses for all the properties. He described hiding when helicopters flew over during searches in 2003 and 2004. He described moving Maya between locations when he felt discovery was possible. Throughout it all, Webb maintained he'd saved Maya from a meaningless existence. He'd given her purpose, freedom, real life. He genuinely believed he'd done nothing wrong. At 9:47 p.m., over 5 hours into the interview, Webb finally said something that shifted everything. You should ask Sarah how she feels, he said. Ask her if she wants to be rescued. Ask her if she's grateful you've destroyed the life we built. The implication was clear. Maya had been psychologically conditioned over 18 years to believe Webb's narrative. Stockholm Syndrome taken to its extreme, where the captive no longer recognized their captivity. The breakthrough in Maya Rodriguez's case wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was the accumulation of evidence collected over days following December 11, 2021. Search teams descended on Webb's properties, the current residence in Sandy and 2 previous locations in the Mount Hood National Forest and near the Columbia River Gorge. What they found confirmed Webb's confession and revealed the scope of Maya's captivity. At the Sandy property, investigators found a well-maintained cabin with solar panels, a vegetable garden entering winter dormancy, chickens in a coop, and evidence of 2 people living a subsistence lifestyle. Maya's belongings were there: clothes, books, journals. The journals were particularly revealing. Hundreds of pages written over 18 years documenting Maya's psychological journey from kidnapping victim to willing participant in Webb's wilderness fantasy. The early entries from late 2003 were heartbreaking. I don't know how many days it's been. Thomas says I need to let go of calendar time, that it's part of the artificial structure that kept me trapped. But I can't stop counting. My mom's birthday is in 3 days. I should be there. Why can't I leave? Why do I keep staying? Thomas says if I contact my family now after disappearing, they'll have me committed. He says they won't understand the choice I made. He says they'll think he kidnapped me. Maybe he did. I don't know anymore. I'm so confused. The entries showed classic patterns of psychological manipulation. Webb had isolated Maya physically and emotionally, convinced her that returning would result in psychiatric institutionalization, gradually reshaped her reality until his narrative became her own. By 2005, the tone had shifted. I haven't thought about Portland in weeks. The life I had there feels like a dream, like it happened to someone else. Thomas is teaching me to hunt. I killed a deer yesterday. I cried while butchering it. But I also felt proud. This is real in a way nothing in my old life was real. Asterisk by 2010, asterisk Sarah is who I am now. Maya was a girl who didn't understand anything about real living. I'm grateful Thomas saved me from wasting my life in civilization. We're building something pure here. Asterisk the journal showed complete psychological transformation. The woman who called herself Sarah Webb genuinely believed she'd chosen this life. That she was free, that Webb had saved rather than imprisoned her. Forensic psychologists who reviewed the journals identified textbook examples of coercive control, trauma bonding, and identity reformation. Dr. Patricia Simmons, a specialist in long-term captivity cases, explained to investigators, "What you're seeing is the result of systematic psychological manipulation over 18 years. Webb isolated Maya geographically and socially. He controlled all information she received about the outside world. He gradually convinced her that her previous life was false and this new life was authentic. By reframing kidnapping as salvation, he made her complicit in her own captivity. It's one of the most complete cases of psychological conditioning I've seen." At the Mount Hood property now abandoned, investigators found evidence of the first 4 years of Maya's captivity. A small cabin, barely winterized. Chains bolted to walls, evidence that in the early period, Webb had physically restrained Maya when necessary. This contradicted his claims that she'd never been locked up. In the beginning, when Maya still resisted, Webb had used physical restraints. As her psychological conditioning deepened, physical restraints became unnecessary. At the Columbia Gorge property, used from 2007 to 2013, investigators found a more developed homestead. Garden beds. A workshop, evidence of a life being built. By this period, Maya was apparently a willing participant, helping expand and improve their wilderness home. The breakthrough that finally conclusively proved Webb's guilt came from phone records. While Webb claimed they'd lived entirely off-grid, investigators found evidence he'd maintained a prepaid cell phone for emergencies. The phone had been used sparingly, but records showed it had pinged off towers near Portland on September 3, 2003, despite Webb's alibi claiming he was in Mount Hood with students. Investigators re-interviewed the students from Webb's 2003 wilderness course. Under careful questioning 18 years later, 2 students admitted something they hadn't mentioned in 2003. Webb had left the camp on the evening of September 3, claiming he needed to get supplies from town. He'd been gone for approximately 4 hours. Those 4 hours were enough time to drive to Portland, pick up Maya, and return. Webb's alibi had always been weak, but in 2003, detectives hadn't pushed hard enough to break it. The phone records, the revised student testimony, and Webb's own confession created an airtight case. He'd planned Maya's abduction, executed it during a brief window when he had an alibi, and successfully hidden her for 18 years. The question that haunted investigators was one Dr. Simmons articulated. After 18 years of conditioning, is Maya Rodriguez still in there somewhere, or has she been completely replaced by Sarah Webb? Thomas Webb's life before Maya Rodriguez revealed a pattern that, in hindsight, had been obvious. Webb was born in 1958 in Boulder, Colorado. His childhood was marked by an obsessive interest in wilderness survival and a profound distrust of modern society. His parents described him as intelligent but socially isolated, preferring solitude in nature to human connection. He earned a degree in environmental science from Colorado State University in 1981, but never pursued traditional employment. Instead, he worked as a wilderness guide, survival instructor, and occasional consultant for outdoor education programs. In 1987, Webb married a woman named Catherine Mills. The marriage lasted less than 2 years. Catherine filed for divorce, citing Webb's controlling behavior and his insistence that they live off-grid in conditions she found unbearable. She described him as charismatic but deeply manipulative, capable of making isolation seem like enlightenment. "He had this way of making you feel like you were the problem," Catherine told investigators in 2021 after Webb's arrest. "Like if you wanted basic things, electricity, running water, contact with family, you were shallow and corrupted by society. I started believing him. I almost lost myself completely before I finally left." After the divorce, Webb moved frequently, Colorado to Nevada to California to Oregon. He worked short-term positions teaching wilderness survival, never staying anywhere long enough for patterns to emerge. In 1995, he inherited property in Oregon from a distant uncle. The property was remote, undeveloped forest land in the Mount Hood National Forest area. Webb saw it as an opportunity to finally build the off-grid life he'd always envisioned. He worked various outdoor education positions while developing his property. He taught weekend courses through community colleges and outdoor organizations. Students generally praised his knowledge and competence, though some mentioned he seemed to take particular interest in female students who expressed dissatisfaction with modern life. In 2001, Webb taught a course on wilderness ethics at Portland Community College. Maya Rodriguez attended. She was 21 years old, idealistic, searching for meaning. She fit Webb's target profile perfectly. Over the next 2 years, Webb cultivated a mentorship relationship with Maya. He called her periodically, always from prepaid phones. He positioned himself as someone who'd found answers to questions she was asking. He slowly, carefully groomed her for what would come. On September 3, 2003, Webb executed a plan he'd probably been developing for months. He used the wilderness course as cover, leaving his students briefly to drive to Portland. He picked up Maya under the pretense of continuing their philosophical conversations. He took her to his isolated property, and he convinced her through a combination of manipulation, isolation, and psychological pressure to stay. Forensic psychologists identified Webb as a textbook example of a captor who doesn't see himself as criminal. He genuinely believed he was saving Maya from a meaningless existence. He reframed kidnapping as rescue, isolation as freedom, control as guidance. Webb is narcissistic and delusional, Dr. Simmons explained. He's convinced himself that his worldview is objectively correct and that anyone who doesn't share it is brainwashed by society. This allowed him to justify taking Maya. In his mind, he was freeing her, not imprisoning her. What made Webb particularly dangerous was his intelligence and patience. He'd spent 2 years grooming Maya before taking her. He'd carefully constructed alibis. He'd chosen remote properties where discovery was unlikely. He'd systematically broken down Maya's identity and rebuilt it to match his vision. And for 18 years, he'd succeeded. Thomas Webb was formally arrested at 11:30 p.m. on December 11, 2021, charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and interference with custody. Additional charges would likely follow as the investigation continued. He was remarkably calm during booking, answering questions politely, showing no emotional response to the seriousness of his situation. When read his Miranda rights, he indicated he understood them but declined to request an attorney. "I don't need a lawyer," he said. "I'll tell the truth about what happened. Sarah will confirm everything I've said." That confidence revealed the depth of his delusion. He genuinely believed Maya would support his narrative, would tell authorities she'd chosen this life willingly, would vindicate his actions. The arraignment happened December 13, 2021. Webb appeared in court looking calm and oddly dignified in his orange jumpsuit. When asked to enter a plea, he said simply, "Not guilty. I saved her." The judge set bail at $2 million given flight risk and severity of charges. Webb had no assets capable of meeting that bail. He was remanded to Multnomah County Detention Center to await trial. Meanwhile, Maya Rodriguez, who still referred to herself as Sarah Webb, remained in a strange legal limbo. She wasn't under arrest, but she wasn't exactly free either. She was placed in protective care at a secure facility where she could receive psychological evaluation and eventually treatment. Her first interaction with her parents happened December 12th, less than 24 hours after her identification. The reunion took place in a controlled environment at the facility, with psychologists present to manage what everyone knew would be a traumatic encounter. Carmen and Luis Rodriguez entered the room where their daughter waited. They'd had 18 years to imagine this moment. Nothing prepared them for the reality. Maya looked like a stranger, at 41 years old. Weathered by 18 years of outdoor living, her face lined in ways that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with hardship, she bore little resemblance to the 23-year-old who disappeared. Her dark hair was streaked heavily with gray, her hands were calloused and scarred. She held herself with wariness like a wild animal cornered. "Maya," Carmen whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My hija, my baby." She moved forward to embrace her daughter. Maya stepped back, her body tense. "My name is Sarah," she said quietly. "I don't know who you people are." The words shattered Carmen. Lewis made a sound like he'd been physically struck. The psychologist intervened, gently explaining that this reaction was expected, that 18 years of psychological conditioning wouldn't disappear instantly. The session lasted only 20 minutes. Sarah couldn't emotionally handle more. She insisted she wanted to go home. By home, she meant the cabin in Sandy, the life with Webb. She couldn't conceptualize the Hawthorne house where she'd grown up. Those memories had been buried so deeply they might as well not exist. Carmen and Lewis left devastated. They'd imagined a joyful reunion, their daughter grateful for rescue. Instead, they'd encountered someone who didn't want to be found, who saw them as strangers disrupting her life. "We got her back," Lewis said numbly in the car afterward. But we didn't get her back. The statement captured the horrible paradox. Maya's body had been recovered. Maya's mind remained captive. News of Maya Rodriguez's discovery exploded across Portland and then nationally on December 12, 2021. The Hawthorne district, which had slowly forgotten Maya's story over 18 years, suddenly remembered everything. The case that had defined the community's early 2000s trauma came roaring back into consciousness. Vigils were organized spontaneously. Hundreds of people gathered at the Morrison Street location where Maya had last been seen, bringing candles and flowers and tears. Many who attended hadn't lived in Portland in 2003, but the story resonated: a young woman vanishing, a family's 18-year search, the impossible recovery. The Hawthorne community struggled with complex emotions: relief that Maya was alive, horror at what she'd endured, guilt that she'd been less than 30 miles away for years, living in Sandy, occasionally even visiting Portland. That Instagram photo proved she'd been in the city just hours before her discovery, and no one had recognized her. Social media exploded with commentary. The Instagram post that had led to Maya's discovery went viral, shared millions of times. Jennifer Cole, who'd posted the photo, gave emotional interviews about the surreal experience of accidentally solving an 18-year mystery. "I just posted a picture of vegetables," she said, crying on camera. "I had no idea Maya was in the background. I didn't know her story. I'm so glad my random post brought her home." The missing persons community celebrated. Carmen Rodriguez had been a fixture in that world for 18 years. Every family who'd sat in those Tuesday night meetings, who'd organized searches and hung flyers and refused to give up, they all felt this victory personally. Linda Patterson, who'd searched for her own son since 2001, spoke at a press conference with tears streaming. "This gives us all hope. If Maya could be found after 18 years, maybe our loved ones can be found too." Carmen never gave up, and she was right not to give up. But celebration mixed with discomfort as details emerged about Maya's psychological condition, about her insistence that her name was Sarah, about her apparent Stockholm Syndrome. The story wasn't a simple rescue. It was complicated, messy, painful. Some people blamed Maya. Social media comments were cruel. "Why didn't she escape? She must have wanted to stay." 18 years is a long time to not find a phone. These comments enraged advocates who understood trauma and manipulation. Dr. Simmons gave multiple interviews explaining psychological captivity, how someone could be imprisoned without physical chains, how systematic manipulation could make a victim believe their captivity was freedom. Thomas Webb's arrest divided opinion. Some saw him as a monster who'd stolen 18 years of Maya's life and destroyed her family. Others, a disturbing minority, saw him as someone who'd offered an alternative lifestyle and shouldn't be punished for Maya's choice to accept it. This latter group horrified most observers, but it revealed how Webb's narrative, that he'd saved rather than taken Maya, had some cultural resonance, particularly among people who romanticize wilderness living and critique modern society. The Portland State University community, where Maya had been weeks from graduating when she disappeared, organized memorial gatherings. Professors who taught her, now themselves approaching retirement, spoke about the brilliant student they'd lost. Her college friends, now in their 40s with careers and families, wept for the life Maya should have lived. Rachel Kim, Maya's best friend from college, gave an interview that went viral. "People keep asking why she didn't escape. That's the wrong question. The right question is, what did he do to her mind that made her think she didn't need to escape? That's the real crime. He didn't just take her body, he took her identity. He took Maya and turned her into someone else." The community rallied around the Rodriguez family, but that support was bittersweet. Everyone wanted to celebrate, but Carmen and Lewis couldn't celebrate. They'd gotten their daughter back, but they'd gotten back a stranger who didn't want to be with them. Thomas Webb's trial began on March 15, 2022, 3 months after his arrest. The prosecution was led by Multnomah County Senior Deputy District Attorney Patricia Morrison, who'd handled high-profile cases for 20 years but called Webb's case the most psychologically complex she'd ever encountered. The defense was led by Marcus Chen, a public defender known for taking difficult cases. Chen's strategy was risky but logical given the evidence. He didn't deny Webb had taken Maya. Instead, he argued she'd gone willingly and stayed willingly, that this was a relationship between consenting adults, not a kidnapping. The trial lasted 3 weeks and became a media sensation. Every major news outlet covered it. Court TV live-streamed proceedings. The courtroom was packed daily with observers, journalists, and members of the missing persons community. The prosecution's case was methodical. Morrison presented phone records proving Webb had been in Portland when he claimed to be in Mount Hood. She called students from the 2003 wilderness course who testified Webb had left camp that evening. She presented the chains found at the Mount Hood property, proving Maya had been physically restrained. Most importantly, Morrison called forensic psychologists who'd evaluated Maya and reviewed her journals. Dr. Patricia Simmons testified for 3 hours about coercive control, psychological manipulation, and trauma bonding. Maya Rodriguez did not make a free choice to live in isolation for 18 years, Dr. Simmons testified. She was systematically broken down psychologically, isolated from all outside perspectives, and rebuilt to match Mr. Webb's vision. This is one of the most complete cases of psychological captivity I've studied. The woman who calls herself Sarah Webb is a construct created by the defendant through 18 years of manipulation. The defense's cross-examination attempted to poke holes in this theory. Chen pointed to journal entries from 2010 onward where Maya expressed happiness and gratitude. He argued that even if the initial taking was wrong, Maya had eventually embraced the lifestyle and become a genuine willing participant. At what point does a person regain agency? Chen asked Dr. Simmons. If she truly believed she was free, if she expressed happiness in her journals, if she participated in building their life together, at what point does she become responsible for her own choices? It was a dangerous argument that many observers found offensive, but Chen was doing his job, defending his client with every available strategy. The prosecution's most dramatic moment came when they called Carmen Rodriguez to testify. Carmen, now 66, took the stand wearing forest green, Maya's favorite color. She spoke about the 18 years of searching, the countless false leads, the hope that never died. "My daughter didn't choose this," Carmen said, her voice steady despite tears streaming down her face. "The woman you see today calling herself Sarah isn't making a choice. She's still captive, even though the physical isolation has ended. That man stole my daughter's life, her education, her future. Her identity. He stole 18 years from our family, and he did it deliberately, methodically, without remorse." The defense declined to cross-examine Carmen. There was no good way to question a mother's testimony about losing her daughter. The central question of the trial became, could Maya testify? The defense wanted her to testify that she'd gone willingly, that she'd been happy, that Webb had done nothing wrong. The prosecution opposed this, arguing Maya was psychologically incapable of providing reliable testimony, that putting her on the stand would be re-traumatizing and would effectively allow Webb to manipulate her one more time. Judge Sarah Martinez ruled that Maya could testify if she chose to, but the court would provide psychological support and allow extensive expert testimony about her mental state to contextualize any testimony she gave. Maya chose to testify. On March 28, 2022, Maya Rodriguez took the stand. She'd been in psychological treatment for 3 months, but she still called herself Sarah. She still struggled to access memories from before 2003. She still expressed confusion about why everyone was treating Webb as a criminal. "Thomas didn't hurt me," she testified, her voice quiet but clear. "He taught me to live authentically. The life I had before was empty. I was trapped in a system that destroys both people and planet. Thomas offered me freedom, I chose it." The courtroom was silent. Carmen wept quietly in the gallery. Lewis sat stone-faced, his eyes closed. The prosecution's cross-examination was gentle but effective. Morrison asked Maya about the chains at the Mount Hood property. Maya admitted there had been difficult days at first when she'd been confused about what I wanted. Morrison asked about contact with family. Maya admitted Webb had encouraged me to let go of past attachments for my own well-being. With each answer, Maya revealed the depth of her conditioning. She couldn't see the manipulation. She still described captivity using Webb's language: freedom, authenticity, liberation. Dr. Simmons was recalled to explain what the jury had just witnessed. "What you heard is not the testimony of a free person," she said. "It's the testimony of someone still psychologically imprisoned." The words she used, they are his words, his philosophy, his worldview. Maya Rodriguez is still in there somewhere, but she's been buried under 18 years of systematic psychological abuse. The jury deliberated for 2 days. On April 2, 2022, they returned a verdict: guilty on all counts: kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, interference with custody. When the verdict was read, Webb showed emotion for the first time. His face crumpled. He looked genuinely confused, as if he couldn't understand why his noble act of salvation was being punished. Sentencing was scheduled for May 15, 2022. Webb faced up to 40 years in prison. The guilty verdict brought Carmen and Luis Rodriguez something they'd been denied for 18 years: official acknowledgement that what happened to Maya was wrong, was criminal, was not her choice. But closure is a word that doesn't quite fit when your daughter is alive but doesn't recognize you. At the sentencing hearing on May 15, 2022, Carmen and Luis were both allowed to give victim impact statements. Carmen spoke first. "For 18 years I searched for my daughter," she said, standing at the podium, her voice steady through tears. "I posted flyers, I organized searches. I never gave up hope that she was alive. And she was alive, but she was being held captive, psychologically tortured, turned into someone else." She paused, composing herself. "People ask if I'm happy she was found. I don't know how to answer that. I'm grateful she's alive. But the daughter I lost in 2003, she's still gone. The woman who exists now doesn't remember being Maya. She doesn't remember our family traditions, her childhood, her dreams. She doesn't remember that she wanted to be a nurse, that she loved hiking in Forest Park, that she called me every Sunday." Carmen looked directly at Webb. "You stole my daughter twice. First you took her physically, then you took her mind. You erased who she was and replaced her with someone who would worship you, depend on you, never question you. That's not love, that's not freedom, that's evil." Luis spoke next. His statement was shorter, his voice rough with emotion. "I stopped living when Maya disappeared," he said. "I just existed, waiting. Now she's back, but I still can't live because she doesn't want to be with us. She wants to go back to you, to the prison you built for her in the wilderness. You didn't just take 18 years from my daughter. You took 18 years from me and my wife. You destroyed 3 lives for your ego, your delusion, your need for control." He wiped tears away roughly. "I hope you spend the rest of your life in an actual prison, so you can finally understand what you did to her." The judge, Sarah Martinez, delivered her sentence with visible emotion. She acknowledged the complexity of the case, that Maya had eventually participated in the life Webb created, but emphasized that initial kidnapping and 18 years of psychological manipulation constituted severe crimes. "Mr. Webb," Judge Martinez said, "you have shown no remorse, no understanding of the harm you've caused. You still believe you saved Miss Rodriguez. That delusion makes you dangerous. You stole 18 years of a young woman's life. You destroyed a family. You deserve the maximum penalty the law allows." She sentenced Webb to 35 years in prison without possibility of parole until he'd served 30 years. At 63 years old, Webb would be 93 before parole consideration. He would likely die in prison. Webb showed no emotion when the sentence was read. He was remanded to Oregon State Penitentiary immediately. After the sentencing, Carmen and Luis faced the cameras outside the courthouse. Carmen spoke. "This sentence gives us some peace, knowing that what happened to Maya has been acknowledged as the crime it was. But our real work is just beginning, helping Maya heal, helping her remember who she was, helping her build a new life." A reporter asked, "Has Maya's condition improved?" Carmen hesitated. "She's in intensive therapy. She's starting to access some childhood memories. She called me mom for the first time last week." Her voice broke. "It was the first time in 18 years she'd said that word to me. So yes, there's progress, but it's slow. It may take years, maybe decades, for her to fully recover. We may never get back the Maya we lost, but we're grateful for any part of her we can help heal." The truth was more complicated than Carmen could say publicly. Maya still insisted her name was Sarah more often than not. She still spoke about Webb with affection and confusion about why he was in prison. She still described her wilderness life with nostalgia rather than horror. But there were moments, brief flickering moments, when Maya emerged from beneath Sarah, when she'd remember a childhood birthday party or a song she used to love. when she'd look at her parents and something in her eyes would recognize them. Those moments were both hope and heartbreak. They proved Maya was still in there, but they also proved how deeply she'd been buried. The Maya Rodriguez case transformed how law enforcement approached long-term missing persons cases and how the public understood psychological captivity. Within months of Webb's conviction, the Oregon State Legislature passed the Maya Rodriguez Act, requiring law enforcement to maintain active investigation protocols for missing persons cases regardless of time elapsed. The act mandated periodic review of cold cases using new technology and allocated funding for specialized cold case units. Carmen Rodriguez's 18 years of advocacy had created infrastructure that now helped other families. The Missing Persons Support Network of Portland, which she'd helped build, became a model for similar organizations nationwide. Federal grant money was allocated to expand their services. The case also sparked important conversations about Stockholm Syndrome and psychological captivity. Dr. Patricia Simmons wrote a book about the case titled Captive Minds: Understanding Long-Term Psychological Imprisonment, which became required reading in forensic psychology programs. Mental health professionals developed new treatment protocols for deprogramming long-term captivity victims. Maya's case provided a rare opportunity to study severe psychological conditioning and develop therapeutic approaches for undoing it. Technology companies, particularly those developing facial recognition software, highlighted the case as an example of AI's potential to solve cold cases. Instagram's algorithm had accomplished what 18 years of traditional investigation couldn't, identifying Maya in a crowd. This led to expanded partnerships between tech companies and law enforcement, with facial recognition software being applied to backlog of cold cases. Within 2 years, the technology helped identify 17 other long-term missing persons. The case also generated uncomfortable but necessary debate about agency, choice, and psychological manipulation. Legal scholars debated, at what point does a kidnapping victim's apparent acceptance of their situation affect culpability? Should Maya be considered a victim throughout all 18 years, or did she become a willing participant at some point? Most experts concluded that true choice requires freedom from coercion, access to alternative perspectives, and ability to leave. Maya had none of these things, even when not physically restrained. She was psychologically imprisoned. The case established important legal precedents about psychological coercion. For the Rodriguez family, the legacy was more personal. They established the Maya Rodriguez Foundation, dedicated to funding therapy for families of missing persons and supporting research into psychological trauma recovery. Carmen continued her advocacy work, but in a transformed capacity. She was no longer searching for her daughter. Now she was helping her daughter heal. It was a different kind of fight, but one she approached with the same fierce determination that had sustained her through 18 years of searching. Maya's story isn't over, Carmen told supporters at a foundation fundraiser. She's still fighting every day to remember who she was, to separate reality from the fiction Webb created. But she's fighting, that's what matters. She survived 18 years of captivity. She'll survive the recovery too. We'll make sure of it. The Foundation's first initiative was funding long-term psychological treatment for recovered missing persons, a need that had been largely ignored by the healthcare system. Maya's treatment was expensive and ongoing. Most families couldn't afford it. The Foundation aimed to change that. Maya herself remained largely out of public eye. She lived in a secure residential treatment facility, working daily with therapists to reconstruct her identity and process her trauma. The journey was slow, painful, marked by setbacks and small victories. But 18 months after her discovery, Maya reached a milestone. She agreed to visit the house in Hawthorne where she'd grown up. Walking through rooms she hadn't seen in nearly 2 decades triggered a flood of memories: childhood birthdays, family dinners, the person she'd been before. She broke down crying in her old bedroom, which Carmen had preserved all those years. "I lived here," she whispered, touching the walls, the furniture. "This was mine. I was Maya Rodriguez." It was the first time she'd claimed that identity since her discovery. Carmen and Louis held their daughter while she cried, grieving the years they'd lost while simultaneously celebrating the person they might yet recover. The legacy of Maya Rodriguez was still being written. Her story wasn't a simple rescue with a happy ending. It was an ongoing process of healing, of reconstruction, of learning to live again after 18 years had been stolen. But she was alive, she was fighting, and her family had never stopped believing she was worth fighting for. This case proves justice can come even after 18 years. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with someone who appreciates true crime stories. Your support helps bring attention to cases that might otherwise be forgotten. What cold case do you think deserves more attention? Comment below. Every unsolved case represents a family still waiting for answers, still hoping for the closure that finally came to the Rodriguez family after nearly 18 years of searching.